I am Lauren Holloway, 48, and literally last month, my role as a hospice nurse, the heart I poured into caring for others, it backfired in ways I never saw coming. The family home, the one I'd sacrificed so much to keep in our name, the one I left behind 20 years ago, it blew up into a full-on betrayal at my so-called homecoming. My younger sister Melissa straight up demanded I walk away from my claim to it, and when I clapped back, the porch went dead silent. "You don't belong here anymore," she screamed, with her husband smirking behind her. But here's the tea. Her venom didn't break me, it lit a spark. I'm not just pushing back, I'm about to flip the script and change everything. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, hit subscribe, and stay with me for the most satisfying fight for justice you'll ever hear. Looking back, it's almost unreal what I'd uncover once I started digging. The gravel crunched under my boots as I stepped onto the familiar driveway, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. My heart pounded, not from exhaustion but from the weight of returning to this place. Our family home, a 2-story colonial with chipped white paint and a sagging porch, nestled in the rolling hills of upstate New York. I'd driven 6 hours, my old Corolla rattling with every mile, to stand here again. 20 years ago, I'd left to chase my calling as a hospice nurse, to hold hands through final breaths, to offer peace where there was pain. I thought I'd made peace with leaving, but the pull of this house, Grandpa's house, never faded. It was the one place I'd always felt seen, where his stories by the fireplace made me believe I could be something. I adjusted my scarf, the October chill biting at my knuckles, and hauled my duffel bag over my shoulder. The front door, once a warm red, was now a faded gray, and the windows stared blankly at me. I knocked, my fist hesitant but firm. No answer. I knocked again, louder, my breath fogging in the air. The door creaked open, and there she was, Melissa, my younger sister by 5 years, her arms crossed, her lips a tight line. Her auburn hair was pulled back severely, and her eyes, once soft like Mom's, were sharp, cutting. "What are you doing here, Lauren?" she asked, her voice low, like she'd been expecting me, but hoped I wouldn't show. "I'm home," I said, forcing a smile though my stomach twisted. "I wanted to see the place, see you." It wasn't the whole truth. I'd heard whispers from a cousin about the house, about papers changing hands, but I wanted to see it for myself. Melissa's jaw tightened, and she stepped onto the porch, pulling the door shut behind her. "You can't just show up," she said. "This isn't your home anymore." Her words hit like a slap. I set my bag down, my fingers brushing the rough canvas, grounding me. "It's our home, Melissa. Grandpa left it to both of us." She laughed, a short, bitter sound, and leaned closer, her perfume sharp and expensive. "You left, I stayed. You don't get to waltz back in." Behind her, I saw a shadow move in the window, her husband, Greg, watching, his silhouette stiff. I straightened, my nurse's calm kicking in, the one I used when families lashed out in grief. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I just want to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," she snapped. "You're not welcome here." She turned, her boots clicking on the porch, and slammed the door. The lock clicked, final, like a gavel. I stood there, my breath shallow, staring at the peeling paint, my hands clenched, nails digging into my palms, but I didn't move. Not yet. I'd spent years soothing patients, reading their unspoken pain, and I knew Melissa's venom wasn't just anger. There was something else, something she wasn't saying. I picked up my bag and walked back to my car, the gravel louder now, each step heavier. I slid into the driver's seat, my hands shaking as I gripped the wheel. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. A text from my old friend Sarah, a lawyer I'd called before making this trip. "Heard anything yet? Be careful." I typed back, my thumbs unsteady. "She kicked me out. Something's wrong." I hit send and stared at the house, its windows dark now, like eyes refusing to meet mine. I wasn't just here for nostalgia. Grandpa's will, the one he'd read to us before I left, had been clear. The house was ours, mine and Melissa's, to share. So why was she acting like it was hers alone? I turned the key in the ignition, the engine sputtering to life. I wasn't leaving, not yet. I'd find out what she was hiding, even if it meant tearing open old wounds. The drive to the motel on the edge of town was a blur, my mind replaying Melissa's face, her words. I checked in, the clerk's bored voice barely registering, and dropped onto the creaky bed in my room, staring at the water-stained ceiling. I thought of Grandpa, his calloused hands, his stories about building this family, this home. He'd believed in me, even when I chose nursing over the practical paths Mom and Dad pushed: college, marriage, a desk job. Melissa had followed their script, marrying Greg, staying close, while I was the outcast, the one who ran off. But I hadn't run. I'd built a life, one patient at a time, one story at a time. And now this house, the last piece of Grandpa I had, was slipping away. I pulled out my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keys. I started searching county records, property deeds, anything public about the house. My eyes burned as I scrolled, but I couldn't stop. Then I saw it. A transfer of ownership dated 2 years ago to Melissa and Greg. My heart sank. Grandpa died 3 years ago. How could they have changed the deed? I leaned back, my head against the wall, the truth settling like a stone. They'd done something to the will. I wasn't just fighting for a house, I was fighting for what was right. I grabbed my phone and texted Sarah again. "Found a deed transfer, we need to talk." I set the phone down, my resolve hardening. Melissa thought she could shut me out, but she'd underestimated me. This wasn't over. The motel room's fluorescent light buzzed faintly as I sat on the edge of the bed, my laptop screen casting a pale glow across my hands. My fingers lingered on the keyboard, the deed transfer still burning in my mind, Melissa and Greg's names glaring where mine should have been. I closed my eyes and suddenly I was 16 again, standing in the kitchen of our family home, the smell of Mom's pot roast heavy in the air. It was one of those Sunday dinners where the table groaned under the weight of casseroles and expectations. I just won a regional essay contest for a piece about palliative care, my first real spark toward becoming a hospice nurse. I'd clutched the certificate, my heart swelling, ready to share it with everyone. But when I held it up, my voice shaky with pride, Mom barely glanced over. "That's nice, Lauren," she said, her eyes already on Melissa, who was waving her acceptance letter to a fancy business school. Dad clapped Melissa's shoulder, his grin wide. "That's my girl, making us proud." My certificate sat untouched on the table, buried under napkins by dessert. I opened my eyes, the memory stinging like a fresh cut. That wasn't the only time. At 18 I'd worked double shifts at a local diner to save for nursing school, coming home with grease-stained aprons and stories of patients I'd met during my volunteer hours at the hospital. I'd tell Grandpa, his eyes crinkling as he listened, but Mom and Dad? They'd nod absently, then pivot to Melissa's latest achievement: a promotion at her internship, a new car, a boyfriend who checked all their boxes. "Melissa's going places," Dad would say, his voice warm, while I stood there, invisible, my dreams dismissed as too emotional or not practical. Even when I graduated nursing school, top of my class, Mom sent a text. "Congrats, Melissa's engaged, by the way." I'd stared at that message, my cap still in my hands, feeling like I'd been erased. I shifted on the motel bed, my fingers curling into the thin comforter. It wasn't just about praise, it was the way they made me feel like my work, my heart, didn't measure up. Hospice nursing wasn't glamorous. It was late nights, holding trembling hands, listening to final confessions, helping families say goodbye. But it was my calling, the thing that made me feel alive. Grandpa got it. He'd sit with me on the porch, his old flannel soft under my cheek, as I leaned against him, and he'd say, "You're doing God's work, Lauren. Don't let anyone tell you different." He'd left me the house, or so I thought, because he saw me, really saw me. But Melissa? She'd stayed close, played the part of the perfect daughter, and soaked up every ounce of their approval. Another memory hit, sharper. I was 28, visiting for Christmas, my first year working hospice. I'd shared a story about a patient, Mrs. Carter, who'd smiled at me as she passed, her hand in mine. It was the kind of moment that kept me going. But at the dinner table, Melissa cut me off mid-sentence. "Can we not talk about death? It's depressing." Mom nodded, passing the mashed potatoes. "Let's hear about your new job, Mel. Marketing director, right?" I'd bitten my lip, my fork still in my hand, and Grandpa had reached over, squeezing my wrist under the table. Later he'd whispered, "They don't get it, but I do." That was the last Christmas I spent there. I left for good a few months later, chasing my work, my purpose, across state lines. Now staring at the motel ceiling, I felt that old ache, the one I'd buried under years of patient charts and late-night shifts. I wasn't just fighting for the house. I was fighting for every time I'd been overlooked, every time my passion was brushed aside for Melissa's polished life. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through old photos until I found one of Grandpa and me on the porch. His arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing. My throat tightened. He'd wanted me to have a piece of this place, his legacy. I could still hear his voice, steady and sure, reading the will to us after his diagnosis. The house goes to my girls, Lauren and Melissa. Equal shares. Equal. So how had it ended up in her name alone? I stood, pacing the small room, my boots scuffing the worn carpet. My hands trembled as I opened my laptop again, digging deeper into the county records. There it was, the deed transfer, clean and official, but too clean. No mention of me, no record of a sale. My gut churned. Melissa had always been calculating, but this was something else. I thought of her on the porch, her eyes cold, her voice sharp. She wasn't just protecting the house, she was hiding something. I grabbed a notepad from my bag, jotting down dates, names, anything that might help. My pen scratched furiously, the sound grounding me. I wasn't that invisible girl anymore, the one who shrank at the dinner table. I'd spent years learning to read people, to see through their defenses. Melissa was scared and I was going to find out why. I texted Sarah again. Can you check for any filings on Grandpa's will? My phone buzzed almost instantly. On it. Meet me tomorrow? I typed back, yes, noon. I set the phone down, my pulse steadying. The memories of being sidelined, of watching Melissa shine while I faded, they didn't just hurt, they fueled me. I wasn't here to beg for scraps of approval. I was here to take back what was mine, to honor Grandpa's trust. Melissa thought she could erase me again, but she was wrong. I'd spent too long fighting for others' peace to let her steal mine. The motel's coffee maker gurgled as I sat at the wobbly desk, my laptop open to Sarah's email. Her message was short but heavy. No record of a will amendment in the county filings. Something's off. My fingers tightened around my mug, the bitter coffee grounding me as my mind raced. Melissa's face on the porch, her sharp words, the way Greg's shadow loomed behind her, it all clicked into place. They weren't just keeping me out, they were hiding something big. I set the mug down, its warmth fading against my palm, and leaned closer to the screen. This wasn't about a sisterly grudge anymore. This was about betrayal, maybe even a crime. I'd spent years reading patients' unspoken fears, catching the flicker of guilt in their eyes. Melissa's hostility wasn't just personal, it was desperate, and desperation meant secrets. I stood, pacing the room, my boots scuffing the carpet. My nursing instincts kicked in, the ones that helped me piece together a patient's story from half-spoken truths. The house had been Grandpa's pride, his legacy after decades of working the lumber mill. He'd read us the will himself, his voice steady despite the cancer eating at him. The house goes to Lauren and Melissa, equal shares. I could still see his hands, calloused and trembling, pointing to the paper. Equal. So how had Melissa and Greg managed to transfer it into their names alone? I stopped pacing, my breath catching. A forged will. It was the only explanation that fit. My stomach churned, not with fear but with a quiet, burning anger. They'd stolen from me, from Grandpa, from everything he'd built. I grabbed my phone and called Sarah. She picked up on the second ring, her voice calm but urgent. Lauren, I dug deeper. The deed transfer looks clean, but there's no record of a new will overriding the original. I pressed the phone closer, my pulse quickening. What does that mean? I asked, my voice low. Sarah paused and I could picture her at her desk, glasses slipping down her nose. It means either the original will was ignored, or they filed a fake one. We need to see the probate records. I nodded, though she couldn't see me, my free hand clenching into a fist. Can you get them? I asked. Already on it? She said. Meet me at the courthouse tomorrow, 10 a.m. Bring anything you have from your grandfather, letters, notes, anything. I hung up, my mind spinning. I opened my duffel bag, digging through old papers I'd brought, mostly keepsakes from Grandpa, letters he'd sent when I first moved away. My fingers brushed something hard at the bottom, a small USB drive labeled in his shaky handwriting, for Lauren. My heart stopped. I'd forgotten about it. He'd given it to me during his last hospital stay, pressing it into my hand with a weak smile. Watch this when you need me, he'd said. I'd tucked it away, too raw to watch it then, too busy with patients after. I grabbed my laptop, my hands trembling as I plugged in the drive. The screen flickered, and there he was, Grandpa, sitting in his recliner, his flannel shirt loose on his frail frame, his eyes still sharp. Lauren, he began, his voice gravely but warm. If you're watching this, I'm probably gone. I leaned closer, my throat tight. I know you and Melissa don't always see eye to eye, but I trust you to keep this family together. The house is yours, both of yours. I signed the will, notarized, with my lawyer, Mr. Hargrove. It's ironclad. He coughed, his hand shaking as he sipped water. If anyone tries to change it, they're lying. You fight for what's yours, girl. I believe in you. The video ended and I sat there, tears burning my eyes. I replayed it, catching every word, every pause. Ironclad. Notarized. Hargrove. I knew that name. He'd been Grandpa's lawyer for years, semi-retired now but still in town. I stood, my resolve hardening like steel. Melissa and Greg had forged a will. I was sure of it. The USB drive felt heavy in my hand, a lifeline to the truth. I pictured Melissa's smug face, Greg's silent smirk, and my anger flared hotter. They thought they could erase me, rewrite Grandpa's wishes, but they'd underestimated me. I'd spent years fighting for patients who couldn't fight for themselves, holding their hands through the worst days. This was no different. I opened my laptop again, searching for Hargrove's contact info. His office was still listed, a small practice 10 miles away. I jotted down the number, my pen digging into the notepad. Tomorrow I'd meet Sarah, get the probate records, and find Hargrove. I'd build the case, piece by piece, just like I'd piece together patients' stories. I leaned back, my eyes on the USB drive. Grandpa's voice echoed in my head. Fight for what's yours. I would. Not just for the house, but for him. For every time I'd been dismissed. For every moment I'd held my tongue. Melissa thought she'd won, but this was just the beginning. I slipped the drive into my pocket, my fingers brushing its edges, a promise to myself. The truth was out there, and I'd find it, no matter what it took. The morning sun filtered through the motel's thin curtains, casting stripes across the desk where I sat, my coffee cold and untouched. The USB drive lay beside my phone, Grandpa's handwriting on its label catching the light. His voice from the video journal still echoed in my head. Fight for what's yours. I'd barely slept, my mind churning with questions about the forged will, Melissa's desperation, and what Sarah might find in the probate records. Today was the day we'd start unraveling this mess. I stood, my joints stiff from the lumpy mattress, and pulled on my jacket, the weight of the USB drive in my pocket grounding me. I wasn't just walking into a courthouse. I was walking into a fight for Grandpa's legacy, for my place in this family. I drove to the courthouse, the town's quiet streets blurring past, my hands steady on the wheel. Sarah was waiting outside, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, her briefcase clutched under one arm. She waved, her smile warm but sharp, like she was ready for battle. You okay? She asked as I approached, her eyes scanning my face. I nodded, though my stomach twisted. Just ready to figure this out, I said, my voice quieter than I meant. She squeezed my arm, her touch brief but firm. We will. Let's go. We climbed the courthouse steps, the stone cold under my boots, and stepped into the lobby, the air smelling of old paper and polish. Inside, Sarah led me to the clerk's office, where a woman with tired eyes handed us a thin file on Grandpa's estate. My fingers itched as I opened it, scanning the pages. There it was, a will, dated a month before Grandpa's death, naming Melissa and Greg as sole beneficiaries of the house. My heart sank. It looked real, stamped, notarized, official. But something was off. The signature was Grandpa's, or close to it, but the loops were too neat, too steady for a man whose hands shook in his final months. I glanced at Sarah, who was already frowning, her pen tapping the page. This doesn't add up, she muttered. Your grandfather was bedridden by then. How'd he sign this so cleanly? I pulled the USB drive from my pocket, holding it like a talisman. He said in the video the original will was notarized by Hargrove. This one lists a different notary, someone I've never heard of. Sarah's eyes lit up, and she jotted down the name, Patricia Klein. We'll track her down, she said. And Hargrove, if the original will exists, it's still legally binding. My chest tightened, a mix of hope and dread. This was real now, a forged will, a deliberate lie. Melissa hadn't just taken the house. She'd rewritten Grandpa's wishes to cut me out. We left the courthouse, the file tucked under Sarah's arm, and drove to Hargrove's office, a small brick building on the edge of town. My hands fidgeted in my lap, picking at a loose thread on my jeans. I thought of Melissa, her cold stare on the porch, and Greg, always in the background, his silence louder than words. They'd planned this, counted on me staying away, staying quiet. But I wasn't that girl anymore. the one who swallowed her hurt at family dinners. I'd spent years fighting for patients, for their dignity, their truth. This was no different. Hargrove's office smelled of leather and dust, his desk cluttered with yellowed files. He was older now, his hair white, his glasses thick, but his handshake was firm. "Lauren Holloway," he said, his voice warm. "You look just like your grandfather." I smiled, my throat tight, and explained everything. The video, the deed transfer, the suspicious will. He listened, his face darkening as I showed him the courthouse file. "I notarized your grandfather's will myself," he said, leaning back. "Equal shares, you and Melissa. This new one, I never saw it." He rummaged through a cabinet, pulling out a copy of the original will, its pages crisp, Grandpa's signature jagged but unmistakable. My heart leapt. It was real, just as he'd said. Sarah took photos of the document, her phone clicking softly. "This is gold," she said. "With the video and this, we can challenge the forgery in court." Hargrove nodded, his eyes kind but serious. "You'll need to move fast. If they've been living in the house, they'll fight hard to keep it." I thought of Melissa's venom, Greg's smirk, and my resolve hardened. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady now. Hargrove handed me a business card for a local judge he trusted, his handwriting shaky but clear. "Take this to court, Lauren. Your grandfather would be proud." As we left, Sarah and I sat in her car, the engine idling. "We file tomorrow?" she said, her voice firm. "You sure you want to do this? It's gonna get ugly." I looked at the USB drive in my hand, Grandpa's words echoing. "I believe in you." I nodded, my jaw tight. "I'm not letting them steal his legacy." Sarah smiled, a glint of admiration in her eyes. "Then let's do this." I leaned back, my fingers tracing the drive's edges, my mind already racing to the courtroom. Melissa thought she'd won, but she didn't know me. Not anymore. I was ready to fight, not just for the house, but for every moment I'd been erased. Tomorrow, we'd start building the case, and I wouldn't stop until the truth came out. The air in Melissa's dining room was thick with the scent of roasted chicken and tension, the kind that settles into your bones and makes every breath deliberate. I sat at the far end of the table, my hands folded tightly in my lap, the polished wood reflecting the chandelier's dim glow. Sarah had insisted I try talking to Melissa one last time before we filed the court papers, a chance to avoid the legal storm brewing. So here I was, back in the family home, invited under the pretense of a family dinner, after I'd called Melissa and asked to talk. The house felt different. Grandpa's old photos were gone, replaced by sleek abstract art, and the warmth I remembered was buried under Melissa's sterile decor. She sat across from me, her posture rigid, her fork scraping her plate with precision. Greg lounged beside her, his elbow propped on the table, his eyes flicking to me like I was an inconvenience he'd rather swat away. "So, Lauren," Melissa started, her voice syrupy with false warmth, "how's the nursing life? Still mopping up after strangers?" Her smile was sharp, a blade wrapped in civility. The words stung, but I kept my face neutral, my nurse's calm a shield I'd honed over years of handling grieving families. "It's fulfilling," I said, meeting her gaze, "helping people through their hardest moments. It's what I do." She raised an eyebrow, her lips twitching. "Sounds exhausting, but then you always liked playing the martyr." Greg chuckled, a low, grating sound, and my fingers tightened on my napkin, the fabric bunching under my grip. I took a sip of water, the glass cool against my palm, and tried to steer the conversation. "Melissa, I came to talk about the house, Grandpa's will." Her fork clattered against her plate, cutting me off. "Not this again," she said, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You show up after 20 years thinking you can claim what's mine? We've been here, Lauren. Me and Greg. Where were you?" Her eyes narrowed and I saw it. The flicker of fear beneath her anger. The same look I'd seen in patients hiding something. My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. "I was working, building a life, but Grandpa wanted us both to have this place. You know that." Greg leaned forward, his smirk gone, replaced by a cold stare. "You abandoned it," he said. "We've paid the taxes, the upkeep, you don't get to waltz in now." His tone was practiced, like he'd rehearsed this defense. I set my glass down, the clink loud in the silence. "I saw the deed transfer," I said, watching their faces. Melissa's jaw tightened and Greg's hand paused midair, reaching for his wine. "And I know about the new will," I added, my voice firm. "It doesn't add up." Melissa stood, her chair scraping the floor, her face flushed. You're accusing us of what exactly? She snapped, her hands gripping the table's edge. You think we're thieves? You, the saintly nurse who ran off and left us to deal with everything? Her voice rose, and I saw the neighbor's lights flicker through the window as if her outburst carried across the street. I stayed seated, my hands still, though my heart pounded. I'm not accusing, I said. I'm asking for the truth. Grandpa's will was clear, equal shares. Why is your name on the deed and not mine? She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound, and paced to the head of the table. You're delusional, she said. Grandpa changed his mind. He saw you weren't coming back. Her words were a jab, each one meant to cut, but I'd heard worse from families in denial, lashing out in pain. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. I have his video journal, I said, letting the words hang. He said the will was ironclad, notarized by Hargrove, not some new notary I've never heard of. Melissa froze, her lips parting, but no sound came. Greg's hand clenched around his glass, his knuckles white. You're making this up, Melissa said finally, but her voice wavered, her confidence cracking. I stood now, my chair steady behind me, and pulled the USB drive from my pocket, holding it up. I'm not, I said. And I'm not leaving until this is settled. The room went quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. Melissa's eyes darted to Greg, a quick, panicked glance, and he shifted, his jaw tight. You're wasting your time? He said, but his voice lacked the earlier swagger. I slipped the drive back into my pocket, my fingers brushing its edges, a reminder of Grandpa's trust. I turned to leave, my boots heavy on the hardwood floor. I'll see you in court, I said, not looking back. Melissa's voice followed me, sharp but unsteady. You'll regret this, Lauren. I didn't respond. I stepped onto the porch, the night air cool against my flushed skin, and let the door close behind me. My hands shook as I walked to my car, but not from fear, from clarity. They were scared, cornered. I'd seen it in their eyes, the same look I'd caught in patients hiding a diagnosis they couldn't face. I slid into the driver's seat, my breath steadying. Tomorrow, Sarah and I would file the case. Melissa thought she could bully me into silence, but she'd forgotten who I was. I'd fought for others my whole life. Now, I was fighting for me. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, the kind of scent that clings to places where truths are dissected. I sat in the front row, my hands folded tightly in my lap, the USB drive a reassuring weight in my pocket. Sarah sat beside me, her briefcase open, papers neatly stacked, her pen tapping softly as she reviewed our filings. Across the aisle, Melissa and Greg sat with their lawyer, a slick man in a gray suit who kept whispering to them, his gestures sharp. Melissa's face was a mask of composure, her lips pressed thin, but her fingers twisted the strap of her purse, betraying her nerves. Greg slouched beside her, his eyes darting to the judge's bench, then to me, cold and unreadable. The room buzzed with quiet anticipation, the clerk's keyboard clacking as the judge entered, her black robe sweeping like a shadow. Judge Carter, a woman with sharp eyes and gray streaks in her hair, called the session to order. Her voice was calm but commanding, cutting through the murmurs. This is a hearing to contest the validity of a will regarding the estate of Thomas Holloway, she said, glancing at the file. Ms. Lauren Holloway claims the will filed by Melissa and Gregory Bennett is fraudulent. Let's hear the opening statements. My heart pounded, but I kept my face steady, my nurse's calm anchoring me. I'd sat through too many tense moments, families arguing over a patient's final wishes, to flinch now. Sarah stood, her voice clear and measured. Your Honor, we have evidence, including a video journal from Thomas Holloway, and the original will notarized by James Hargrove, proving the filed will is a forgery. She held up a copy of Grandpa's will, the one Hargrove had given us, its edges slightly yellowed but its words undeniable. Melissa's lawyer rose, adjusting his tie, his smile practiced. Your Honor, my clients acted in good faith, executing a will Mr. Holloway amended in their favor, notarized by Patricia Klein, a licensed professional. He gestured to Melissa and Greg, who nodded solemnly, playing the part of dutiful heirs. I caught Melissa's eye and she looked away, her jaw tight. The judge nodded, her gaze flicking between us. Proceed with your evidence, Miss Holloway's counsel. Sarah called me to the stand, and I walked forward, my boots steady on the polished floor. The courtroom felt smaller now, the air heavier, every eye on me. I swore the oath, my hand on the Bible, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. Sarah approached, holding the USB drive. "Lauren, tell us about this video journal," she said. I took a breath, my fingers brushing the stand's edge. "My grandfather gave it to me before he died," I said. "He recorded it to confirm his wishes for the house, to be shared equally between me and my sister, Melissa." Sarah inserted the drive into a laptop connected to a projector, and Grandpa's face appeared on the screen, his voice filling the room. "The house goes to my girls, Lauren and Melissa, equal shares," he said, his eyes tired but fierce. "It's ironclad, notarized by Hargrove. If anyone tries to change it, they're lying." The room was silent, the weight of his words settling over everyone. I glanced at Melissa. Her face was pale, her hands frozen on her purse. Greg shifted, his elbow knocking a pen to the floor, the clatter loud in the hush. Melissa's lawyer stood, his voice smooth but strained. "This video proves nothing, Your Honor. It's undated, and Mr. Holloway could have changed his mind later." Sarah didn't flinch. "We have the original will, notarized by James Hargrove, dated before Mr. Holloway's illness worsened," she said, presenting the document. "The filed will, notarized by Patricia Klein, shows a signature inconsistent with his condition at the time." She held up a medical report I'd provided, detailing Grandpa's tremors in his final months, making a steady signature impossible. The judge leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she examined the documents. Melissa's lawyer called her to the stand and she walked up, her heels clicking, her posture defiant. "My grandfather changed his will," she said, her voice firm but her eyes avoiding mine. "He wanted us to have the house because we stayed, took care of him." Her words were polished, rehearsed, but I saw her fingers tremble, just for a moment. Sarah cross-examined, her tone sharp. "Miss Bennett, can you explain why Mr. Hargrove, your grandfather's lawyer of 20 years, was unaware of this new will?" Melissa hesitated, her lips parting, then closing. He must have forgotten," she stammered. The judge's pen paused, her gaze piercing. I sat back down, my hands clenching the bench, my pulse racing. Melissa's lie was unraveling, and she knew it. Greg's face was stone, but his foot tapped rapidly under the table, a nervous rhythm. The judge called a recess to review the evidence, and Sarah leaned close, her voice low. "We've got them rattled," she whispered. I nodded, my eyes on Melissa as she whispered furiously to Greg, her composure cracking. The video, the will, the medical report, they were pieces of a truth she couldn't bury. I'd spent years reading people's fears, their guilt. Melissa was cornered, and I wasn't backing down. The courthouse hallway was cold, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on the tiled floor as I leaned against the wall, my arms crossed. The recess had stretched into an hour, and my nerves buzzed like a live wire. Sarah stood nearby, scrolling through her phone, her face calm but focused, like she was mentally rehearsing our next move. I clutched the USB drive in my pocket, my thumb tracing its edges, Grandpa's voice still ringing in my ears from the courtroom. "If anyone tries to change it, they're lying." That video had shaken Melissa. I'd seen it in her pale face, the way her hands froze on her purse. But we needed more than a shake, we needed a knockout. Sarah looked up, her eyes bright. "Hargrove just texted. He found something." My heart skipped. "What?" I asked, stepping closer. She turned her phone to show me a scanned document, a notarized affidavit from Hargrove, dated a week after Grandpa's video, confirming he'd stored the original will in his safe. "This ties the video to the timeline," she said, her voice low but electric. "It proves the will Melissa filed came after, and it's inconsistent with his condition." I exhaled, my breath shaky. This was it, the missing piece. I pictured Melissa on the stand, her stammering excuse about Hargrove, forgetting. She hadn't counted on him keeping records. The bailiff called us back, and we filed into the courtroom, the air heavier now, charged with anticipation. Judge Carter's face was unreadable as she settled at the bench, her fingers tapping the file. "Counsel, any additional evidence?" she asked. Sarah stood, holding the affidavit. "Your Honor, we submit an affidavit from James Hargrove, corroborating the video journal and the original will's validity." She handed it to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. Melissa's lawyer shifted in his seat, his tie slightly askew, his earlier confidence fraying. Melissa's eyes darted to Greg, her fingers twisting her purse strap until the leather creaked. The judge read the affidavit, her glasses slipping down her nose. "This is compelling," she said, her voice measured. "Miss Bennett, your counsel claimed Mr. Holloway amended his will, Can you produce any communication with Mr. Hargrove regarding this change? Melissa's lawyer stood, his voice tight. Your Honor, my clients relied on Patricia Klein, a licensed notary, who verified the amended will. The judge's eyes narrowed. I'd like to hear from Ms. Klein herself. Is she available? The lawyer hesitated, his hands gripping his notes. She's out of state, Your Honor, but we have her notarized statement. Sarah seized the moment. Your Honor, Patricia Klein's absence raises questions. We found no record of her practicing in this county during the time of the alleged amendment. She slid a printout across the table. Public records showing Klein's notary license was inactive during Grandpa's final months. I watched Melissa's face, her lips parting, her eyes wide for a split second before she caught herself. Greg leaned close, whispering something, but she shook her head, her hands trembling now. I knew that look, panic, the kind I'd seen in families when a lie unraveled. The judge set the printout down, her gaze sharp. This court will subpoena Miss Klein for testimony. In the meantime, the video journal, the original will, and this affidavit strongly suggest the filed will is fraudulent. My heart leapt, but I kept my face still, my hands steady on the bench. Sarah leaned close, her breath warm against my ear. We're almost there, she whispered. I nodded, my eyes on Melissa, who was staring at the floor, her shoulders hunched. Greg's hand rested on her arm, but it wasn't comfort. It was control, his fingers tight, like he was holding her together. The judge continued. Miss Holloway, you've presented a video explicitly stating Mr. Holloway's intent. Can you confirm its authenticity? I stood, my voice clear despite the knot in my chest. Yes, Your Honor. My grandfather gave me the USB drive himself, during his last hospital stay. I've had it ever since. I pulled it from my pocket, holding it up, the courtroom's silence pressing against me. The judge nodded, her pen scratching notes. This court will verify the video's metadata to confirm its date. Until then, the evidence leans heavily in favor of the original will. Melissa's lawyer tried one last push. Your Honor, my clients have maintained the property for years, while Miss Holloway was absent. The judge cut him off, her voice firm. That's irrelevant if the will was forged. This court prioritizes the decedent's intent. Melissa's head snapped up, her eyes meeting mine, and for the first time I saw fear, raw, unguarded. She knew the video was real, that Grandpa's words were undeniable. I held her gaze, my nurse's calm anchoring me. I'd spent years reading people's truths, and hers was crumbling. As the judge adjourned for further review, I sat back, my hands unclenching, the tension in my shoulders easing. Sarah squeezed my arm, her smile small but triumphant. We've got them, she said. I nodded, my eyes on the USB drive, Grandpa's trust in me burning brighter than ever. Melissa and Greg had built their lie on sand, and the tide was coming in. I wasn't just winning a house, I was reclaiming his legacy, my place. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time I felt the scales tipping. The courtroom felt smaller now, the air thick with the weight of what had just unfolded. Judge Carter's words? The evidence leans heavily in favor of the original will, still hung in the room, sharp and final. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands steady on the polished wood, the USB drive back in my pocket, its weight a quiet reminder of Grandpa's trust. Sarah sat beside me, her pen still, her eyes scanning the room like a hawk. Across the aisle, Melissa and Greg huddled with their lawyer, their whispers sharp and urgent. Melissa's face was a mask, but her eyes betrayed her, wide, darting like a cornered animal. Greg's hand gripped her shoulder, his knuckles pale, his jaw tight. The judge had called for closing arguments, and I could feel the moment building, like the final breath before a storm. Sarah stood, her voice clear and unwavering. Your Honor, the evidence is undeniable. Thomas Holloway's video journal, the original will notarized by James Hargrove, and the affidavit confirming its validity, prove the filed will is a forgery. She gestured to the projector, where Grandpa's face had appeared earlier, his words still echoing in my mind. Melissa and Gregory Bennett knowingly submitted a fraudulent document to steal Lauren Holloway's rightful inheritance. We request the court nullify the forged will, restore the original, and hold the defendants accountable. Her words were a blade, precise and cutting, and I saw Melissa flinch, her hands twisting her purse strap until it creaked. Melissa's lawyer rose, his tie askew, his earlier polish fading. Your Honor, my clients acted in good faith, believing the amended will was valid. he said, his voice strained. "They've maintained the property for years, while Miss Holloway was absent. We ask for leniency and a chance to verify the new notary's credentials." His argument was weak, grasping, and the judge's expression didn't shift, her eyes narrowing as she jotted a note. I caught Sarah's glance, a flicker of confidence passing between us. They were scrambling, and everyone could see it. Judge Carter leaned forward, her glasses glinting under the lights. "I've reviewed the evidence," she said, her voice steady, commanding the room's silence. "The video journal, corroborated by Mr. Hargrove's affidavit and the original will, clearly establishes Thomas Holloway's intent. The filed will, notarized by an inactive notary, Patricia Klein, and inconsistent with Mr. Holloway's medical condition, is hereby declared fraudulent." My heart leapt, a rush of relief so sharp it almost hurt. Melissa's head snapped up, her lips parting, but no sound came. Greg's hand dropped from her shoulder, his face pale, his eyes fixed on the judge. "The original will, dividing the estate equally between Lauren Holloway and Melissa Bennett, is reinstated," the judge continued. "The deed transfer to Melissa and Gregory Bennett is nullified, effective immediately." She paused, her gaze shifting to Melissa and Greg. "Furthermore, this court refers the matter of the forged will to the district attorney for investigation into potential criminal charges." The room went still, the weight of her words sinking in. I heard a soft gasp from Melissa, her hands trembling now, her purse slipping to the floor with a dull thud. I stood, my legs unsteady but my resolve ironclad. "Your Honor," I said, my voice clear despite the lump in my throat, "may I speak?" The judge nodded, her expression softening slightly. I turned to face Melissa and Greg, my eyes steady. "I didn't come here to tear our family apart," I said, my words slow, deliberate. "I came for the truth, for Grandpa's wishes. You tried to erase me, to rewrite his legacy, but you can't erase the truth." Melissa's eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw the sister I used to know, scared, small, caught in her own web. But then her face hardened and she looked away, her hands clenching into fists. Greg stood, his chair scraping loudly, his voice low but venomous. "You think you've won, Lauren? This isn't over." The judge's gavel cracked, sharp and final. "Mr. Bennett, you will address this court respectfully or face contempt." Greg sat, his jaw tight, his eyes burning into me. I didn't flinch. I'd faced down grieving families, angry relatives, moments heavier than this. I turned back to the judge, my voice steady. "Thank you, Your Honor, for honoring my grandfather's wishes." She nodded, her pen tapping the bench. "Court is adjourned." I gathered my things, my hands steady now, the weight of the victory settling over me. Sarah squeezed my arm, her smile wide but quiet. "You did it," she whispered. I nodded, my throat tight, as we walked out of the courtroom, the hallway's cool air a relief against my flushed skin. Behind us I heard Melissa's voice, low and furious, arguing with her lawyer, but I didn't look back. The USB drive in my pocket felt lighter now, like Grandpa's hand on my shoulder guiding me forward. I'd exposed their lies, reclaimed what was mine, and walked away with my head high. The fight had been ugly, but the truth was clean, sharp, undeniable. Melissa and Greg could scramble, but they'd lost. I was done shrinking, done hiding. This was my story now, and I was writing the next chapter. The diner's neon sign flickered outside, casting a warm red glow through the window where I sat, my hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea. The clatter of plates and the low hum of conversation filled the air, a stark contrast to the sterile tension of the courtroom just hours ago. Across from me, Sarah leaned back in the booth, her jacket slung over the seat, her smile easy for the first time all day. Next to her sat Emily, a fellow hospice nurse who'd driven up from Albany to support me, her curly hair spilling over her scarf as she laughed at something Sarah said. The vinyl seat creaked under me, and I felt a warmth I hadn't known I needed, like a breath after holding it too long. These were my people, not bound by blood but by choice, by shared battles and quiet moments like this. I took a sip of tea, the steam curling up, and let my shoulders relax. The courtroom victory still buzzed in my veins. Melissa's pale face, Greg's defeated slump, the judge's gavel sealing the truth. But here, in this worn diner booth, the weight of it softened. "You were a badass in there," Emily said, her eyes bright, her fork pausing over her pie. "The way you looked at Melissa when you spoke, chills." I laughed, a small shaky sound, my fingers tracing the mug's rim. "I was terrified," I admitted, But I kept thinking of Grandpa, how he trusted me to fight for this. Sarah leaned forward, her elbows on the table. You didn't just fight, you won, cleanly. That video, the Will Hargrove's affidavit, they didn't stand a chance. Her voice held a lawyer's pride, but her eyes were soft, like she knew what this cost me. I nodded, my throat tight. It wasn't just about the house, I said, my voice low. It was about being seen, for once. Emily reached across, squeezing my hand, her calloused fingers warm from years of nursing. You're seen here, she said. Always have been. I looked at them. These women who'd shown up without hesitation. Sarah, with her sharp mind and endless files. Emily, with her fierce heart and late-night texts checking on me. They were nothing like the family dinner at Melissa's, where every word was a jab, every glance a judgment. I thought back to that night, the way Melissa's voice dripped with contempt, Greg's smirk cutting deeper than words. They'd tried to erase me, to rewrite Grandpa's legacy, but they couldn't touch this table, this laughter, this trust. I leaned back, the booth's vinyl cool against my back, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Emily pushed her plate toward me, offering a bite of her pie, the cherry filling gleaming under the diner's lights. You need this, she said, grinning. Victory tastes better with sugar. I took a small bite, the tartness sharp on my tongue, and smiled. You're right, I said, and for a moment, the ache of Melissa's betrayal faded, replaced by the warmth of this makeshift family. Sarah raised her coffee mug, her eyes glinting. To Lauren, she said, who took down a forgery and didn't break a sweat. Emily raised her soda and I lifted my tea, the clink of our drinks loud in the quiet booth. To us, I said, my voice steadier now. We talked for hours, the conversation drifting from the case to old memories, Sarah's stories of law school, Emily's tales of patients who'd changed her. I shared a story about Grandpa, how he taught me to plant tomatoes in the backyard, his hands guiding mine in the soil. He always said, "You grow what you nurture," I said, my fingers brushing the USB drive in my pocket. I guess I'm still growing. Sarah nodded, her smile soft. You're nurturing the right things now, she said. Emily nudged me, her shoulder warm against mine. And you've got us to help. As the diner emptied, the waitress wiping down tables, I felt a shift inside me. The family I'd lost, Melissa, Greg, the parents who'd always favored her, weren't my anchor anymore. These women, this moment, this fight, they were my home. I thought of Melissa's cold dining room, the way her words had tried to shrink me, and compared it to this booth, where every laugh, every glance built me up. I'd won the house, but more than that, I'd found my place. The waitress dropped off the check, and Sarah grabbed it, waving off my protest. You've earned this, she said. I smiled, my heart full, and knew she was right. This wasn't just a victory over Melissa, it was a victory for me, for the life I'd built, for the people who saw me when my family never did. The morning light spilled through the motel window, painting the worn carpet in soft golds as I packed my duffel bag, folding my clothes with deliberate care. The court victory was still fresh, the judge's words nullifying the forged will, reinstating Grandpa's original, echoing like a pulse in my chest. But the house wasn't mine yet, not fully. Melissa and Greg had 30 days to vacate per the court order, and I knew they wouldn't go quietly. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from Sarah. Meet me at the house, 10 a.m., we need to secure it. I zipped my bag, my fingers lingering on the USB drive, now tucked safely in a side pocket. Grandpa's voice, his trust, had carried me this far. Now I had to protect what he'd left me, not just from Melissa's schemes but from the weight of our past. I drove to the house, the familiar gravel driveway crunching under my tires, the air crisp with the scent of fallen leaves. Sarah was already there, leaning against her car, a clipboard in hand, her hair pulled back tightly. The house loomed behind her, its chipped paint and sagging porch a reminder of what I'd fought for. You ready for this? She asked as I stepped out, her voice steady but her eyes searching mine. I nodded, my boots firm on the ground. I need to make sure they don't pull anything else, I said, my voice quieter than I meant. Sarah handed me a legal pad, her handwriting neat, a checklist of locks to change, documents to file, inspections to schedule. This is your fortress now, she said. Let's lock it down. We walked to the porch, and I hesitated, my hand on the railing, the wood rough under my palm. The last time I'd stood here, Melissa had slammed the door in my face, her words cutting like glass. Now the house was silent, the windows dark. Sarah knocked, her rap sharp, but no one answered. "They're gone for now," she said, checking her watch. "Probably meeting their lawyer to regroup." I nodded, my stomach twisting. I could still see Melissa's face in court, her panic when the judge ruled against her, Greg's cold stare as they left. They'd lost, but they weren't done fighting. Not yet. Inside, the house felt like a stranger's. Melissa's sleek furniture had replaced Grandpa's worn armchairs, and the walls were bare of his photos, his warmth. I walked to the fireplace, my fingers brushing the mantel where he used to keep his old pipe. "This doesn't feel like home anymore," I said, my voice soft. Sarah set her clipboard down, her hand on my shoulder. "It will again," she said. "You're taking it back piece by piece." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. She was right. I wasn't just reclaiming a house, I was reclaiming my place in it, my history. We met the locksmith at the front door, a gruff man with a toolbox that clanked as he worked. He swapped out the locks, the new keys cold and heavy in my hand. "No one's getting in without these," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. I slipped one key onto my ring, the metal catching the light, and handed a spare to Sarah. "Just in case," I said. She smiled, tucking it into her pocket. "You're building walls, Lauren, good ones." I nodded, my resolve hardening. Melissa had tried to erase me, but these keys, this house, were proof she'd failed. Back outside, I called a property inspector to schedule a walkthrough, my voice steady as I gave the address. Sarah jotted notes, her pen quick. "We'll need a title transfer filed by next week," she said, "and a restraining order if Melissa tries to interfere." I thought of Melissa's last words in court. "This isn't over," and my jaw tightened. "Do it," I said. "I'm done playing nice." Sarah nodded, her eyes glinting with approval. "That's the Lauren I know," she said. As the locksmith drove off, I stood on the porch, my hands in my pockets, the new keys pressing against my thigh. The house was mine again, legally, but I knew the real battle was emotional. I thought of the diner last night, Emily's laugh, Sarah's toast, the warmth of people who chose me. That was my strength now, not the family who'd pushed me away. I looked at the house, its windows catching the sun, and made a silent promise to Grandpa. I'd protect this place, not just for me, but for him, for the girl he believed in. Melissa could fight, but I was drawing a line. This was my boundary, my home, and I wasn't letting anyone cross it again. The sun hung low, painting the family home's front yard in shades of amber as I stood on the freshly swept porch. A paint can in one hand, a brush in the other. The new keys jangled in my pocket, a reminder of the court victory 2 weeks ago, and the locks I'd changed to keep Melissa and Greg out. The house was mine again. Ours, really, as Grandpa's original will intended, but it wasn't enough to just own it. I wanted to restore it, to bring back the warmth Melissa had stripped away with her sterile decor. Today I was starting with the front door, painting it the deep red Grandpa had loved, the color that used to greet me when I'd run up these steps as a kid. My hands moved steadily, the brush gliding over the wood, each stroke a quiet act of reclaiming. I paused, wiping sweat from my brow, and looked out at the yard. The overgrown flower beds, once Grandpa's pride, were tangled with weeds, but I could still see him there, kneeling in the dirt, teaching me how to plant tulips. "You give them a good home, they'll bloom for you," he'd said, his hands steady despite their calluses. I'd spent years nurturing patience, helping them find peace in their final days, but now it was my turn to nurture this place. His legacy. My roots. I set the brush down, my fingers sticky with paint, and pulled my phone from my pocket. I texted Emily, "Painting the house today. Want to help plant some tulips next weekend?" Her reply came fast. "Count me in. Let's make it bloom." The idea had come to me after the diner night with Sarah and Emily, their laughter still warm in my memory. I didn't just want the house back, I wanted it to mean something again, to be a place of healing, like my work. I'd decided to turn part of the property into a community garden, a space for hospice families to find solace, to plant something that would outlast their grief. I'd already called a local nonprofit, and they were eager to partner, offering supplies and volunteers. My fingers tightened around the paintbrush as I imagined it, rows of flowers, benches for quiet reflection, a plaque with Grandpa's name. This wasn't just about me. It was about giving back, about honoring the man who'd seen me when no one else did. A car pulled up, gravel crunching, and Sarah stepped out, her sunglasses pushed up into her hair, a folder under her arm. "Red looks good," she said, nodding at the door as she climbed the porch steps. I smiled, setting the paint can down. "It's a start," I said. She handed me the folder, her expression serious but warm. "Final paperwork for the title transfer," she said. "It's official. You're on the deed, equal shares with Melissa, just like your grandfather wanted." I opened the folder, my eyes scanning the document, my name in bold next to Melissa's. My chest tightened, not with anger, but with relief. "She can't fight this anymore, can she?" I asked, my voice soft. Sarah shook her head. "Not legally. The DA's still investigating the forgery, but the house is yours to do with as you please." I nodded, my fingers brushing the paper, the weight of it grounding me. Melissa hadn't contacted me since the court hearing, her silence louder than her threats. I pictured her face, the panic in her eyes when the judge ruled, and felt a flicker of pity. She'd built her life on appearances, on taking what wasn't hers, but I wasn't her. I was building something real. I walked Sarah inside, the house still bare but already feeling more like home. We stood in the living room, the fireplace cold but familiar, and I told her about the garden idea. Her eyes lit up, her lawyer's pragmatism giving way to excitement. "That's perfect," she said. "It's exactly what this place needs, something alive, something yours." I smiled, my hands still smelling of paint. "Not just mine," I said. "It's for everyone who needs it." She nodded, her hand on my arm. A silent agreement. As Sarah left, I returned to the porch, picking up the brush again. The red paint gleamed, wet and bold, a promise to myself and to Grandpa. I wasn't just restoring a house, I was restoring his name, our name, on my terms. Melissa had tried to erase me, but every stroke of this brush, every plan for the garden was proof she'd failed. I stepped back, the door half painted, and felt a quiet pride. This was my legacy now, not just a house but a purpose. Rooted in the love Grandpa had shown me, I'd make it bloom, for him, for me, for everyone who'd ever felt unseen. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of fresh soil as I knelt in the backyard of the family home, my hands deep in the earth. The community garden was taking shape, rows of tulip bulbs planted, their green tips just peeking through the dirt, a promise of spring. The red-painted front door gleamed in the distance, and the porch, now swept and sturdy, held a new bench I'd built with Emily's help last weekend. I wiped my brow, my fingers smudged with soil, and leaned back on my heels, the sun warming my face. The house felt alive again, not just a structure, but a heartbeat, echoing Grandpa's love and the purpose I'd found in reclaiming it. This wasn't just about winning a court case. It was about finding my own peace, my own worth after years of being pushed aside. I stood brushing dirt from my jeans and walked to the porch, my boots soft on the grass. The USB drive was still in my pocket, a habit now, its weight a quiet reminder of Grandpa's trust. I sat on the bench, my hands resting on the smooth wood, and let my mind wander. I thought of Melissa, her silence since the court ruling, the DA's investigation looming over her, and Greg. I didn't hate her. Not anymore. The anger had faded, replaced by a clarity I hadn't expected. She'd tried to erase me, to rewrite our family's story, but in fighting her, I'd rewritten my own. I wasn't the invisible sister anymore, the one overlooked at family dinners. I was Lauren, the hospice nurse who'd held hands through final moments, who'd fought for truth and won. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through photos from the past week. Emily laughing as we planted bulbs, Sarah hauling mulch with a grin, volunteers from the nonprofit setting up a small sign, Holloway Community Garden. Each image was a piece of something bigger, a legacy that wasn't just about a house but about connection, about giving others the solace I'd found in my work. I thought back to those family dinners, the way Mom and Dad's praise always landed on Melissa, their eyes skimming over me. I'd carried that hurt for years, letting it define me, but now, sitting here, I realized it didn't. My worth wasn't in their approval or Melissa's betrayal, it was in the lives I'd touched, the ground I'd tilled, the home I'd reclaimed. A breeze rustled the trees, and I closed my eyes, picturing Grandpa on this porch, his flannel soft, his voice steady. "You're doing God's work," he'd said, and I felt it now, not just in nursing but in this garden, this fight. I'd spent so long proving myself to others, patients, families, even Melissa, but the real proof was here, in the quiet of this moment. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had my own. The thought settled over me like the sun's warmth, steady and sure, and for the first time I felt truly at peace. I stood, my hands brushing the bench, and walked to the garden, picking up a small watering can. The tulips didn't need much yet, but the act felt right, a small nurturing for what was to come. This place, this legacy was mine to shape now, not just for me, but for everyone who'd find refuge here. I'd won more than a house, I'd won myself. Have you ever had to fight for what's rightfully yours, whether it's a place, a truth, or just your own worth? I know what it's like to feel unseen, to have your story rewritten by someone else's choices. But standing here, in the garden I built from my grandfather's trust, I've learned that peace comes from knowing your own value, from building something that matters. I'm sharing this story because I hope it sparks something in you. Maybe a memory, maybe a fight you're still facing. Drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you've reclaimed your place. If my journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to define success on their own terms. You don't need anyone else's permission to bloom. Just your own heart, your own hands, and a little bit of courage.